Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Over It podcast. I am your co-host, Suzanne Kohlberg, joined as always by the fabulous Christine Kershaw. And today we have a guest. So I'd like to welcome Suzy Wraines. And we were just laughing before we hit record because our last guest was Kristen. And then we have another Kristen coming up. And now I'm Suzanne and we have a Suzy. So if there's any Susans who want to be on our show, we're putting the call out for you. And today's topic is failing to plan means planning to fail. It's the age-old saying, and we're going to discuss that in detail today. So before we get into it, Suzy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, and Suzy is actually short for Suzanne, which is really long to me. And that was my childhood name, was Suzy, and I just kept it. And then the one time I tried to go by Susanna, I thought I was in trouble every day. So that's why it's stuck.
The song's in my head
So
now. Oh, Susanna, won't you cry for me?
Let me tell you, my childhood. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm a raving fan. I listen to you guys all the time. So confessions. So I am an entrepreneur coach, and I work with women who are leaving a medical profession to start an online business. And what that means is basically I help them do business planning, hence what we're going to talk about today. Planning is a thing that I have to nudge my people into thinking about and really put a good positive spin on it and make it enticing because it helps them to not suffer. I went through suffering with not doing business planning. And so I thought, you know what? I can help so many people not suffer like I did. So I created my business, which is Starting a Business Simplified. And that's what I do.
Awesome. So I've been on your podcast, so I know all about you. So I'm going to actually throw Christine under the bus, as I love to do, because you guys haven't met till now. So Christine, what would you like to know on this topic?
Such a juicy topic, and it's so timely because in my work supporting the RCP, we've just been doing materials or working on little workshops and that sort of thing to help people get started. And it's such a big hurdle, whether no matter what you may be doing in your paid employment type thing, to jump into your own business, into the entrepreneur type realm, because you can have really good skills in whatever it is you have branched out into. And you may have been doing something similar in your past job, or you may not have. You might be completely swapping, but that doesn't mean you've got any idea what to do when it comes to business. And it's such a big unknown for many people, and it can be a big hurdle for them to have their zone of genius or their skills that they're so passionate about. And if they don't have some business planning behind them, yeah, okay, you can fly by the seat of your pants for a while, but you will crash eventually. So I'm so excited to, I guess, Suzy, for you, you said that you've experienced it yourself. What was the biggest learning curve in reflection for you as someone starting a new business, or maybe not even new, but going through some of those big hurdles of going, oh, I didn't plan for that. Oh, I didn't plan for that either. Like, if you were newish to a business, what would you say to that person to go, hey, maybe this could be a good place to start?
That's a great question. And my brain automatically went to, who is my service for? Because every business that I've started or tried to start, I'm going to say I had started and then changed my mind. And a lot of it was due to not planning. Literally,
Mm-hmm.
I just started and then I went, oh, I didn't think about who it was that the service was for in a really good detailed way. So who is this for? And then that leads to, how do you serve them? So if you don't know who you're serving, then you don't know how to serve. It's like everything ties together. And then if you don't know that, then how do you price it? And if you don't know that, then how much money do you know you're going to make? And if you don't know that, then how are you going to pay your bills? And everything just snowballs if you don't walk through every section of a good business plan. And to caveat, I simplified it. So what I do is not a traditional business plan that you would take to investors or to a bank for a loan. it's really helping you as the business owner understand that you have a service that you can provide that's viable and that you're going to be able to succeed. So it's going through those things. And I can remember just my husband, I'll tell you, one of the businesses was my husband and I had a photography business. He's a photographer, did it for fun. I'm like, we can make a business out of it because I have a business degree. I had to write a business plan for my schooling, and I didn't do it because I was like, I'm not going to do all that work. We're not doing like a major, huge, big thing. We're just two people doing photography, whatever. Oh my goodness. Do you realize how many types of photography there are out there and what people need? And I didn't even think about it. I was just like, we'll just take pictures. It lasted about 2 years. And we did break even, which is great.
That's impressive because that's hard. Photography is actually, of all things, I do have a bit of insight into it. It's a hobby of mine, but I would not go into doing it because it's intensive, it's competitive, and it's hardcore. So doing what you've done, I'm sure there are a few lessons learned along that way.
Yes. I'm going to interject here. I'm having some thoughts while you guys are speaking. Outside of just business planning, like general life planning, so many people have an aversion to the term plan. It's kind of like how the hyenas in Lion King say, Mufasa, shut up, Mufasa. It's like plan. But when you think about it, we plan so much. It's just because so many of our tasks we've done again and again and again, we don't think about having to plan for them. And for whatever reason, children's coming to mind. So when, you first have a baby and you like the wipes and the nappies and the change of clothes, and if you're formula feeding, bottles and all this, there's so much involved. You're not suddenly just handed a baby. And then I remember when I had a very young baby, one of my friends had a toddler, and it's like crayons and, like all these sorts of things. But suddenly when it comes to business, we just kind of, as you said, we like taking photos, so we'll turn it into a business. Or I think MLMs have a lot to answer for with this, because it's like, you like doing this, you can turn it into a business and cold DM all your friends who are no longer your friends. But having a plan for whatever we do, like something simple, like after recording this, I'm taking my kids swimming. So I'm just thinking sunscreen, togs, change of clothes, like nothing worse than getting out of the pool and realizing you don't have any underwear. But planning happens in so much of our lives that we don't actually factor it into like sitting down to do it. What is the resistance, do you guys think, to planning stuff?
Juicy one. Suzy, I'll let you go first. I've got some other things to build on this too.
Yeah, I was going to say the first thing that I think of, and this is the resistance that I have, and I'm not going to speak for any of my clients, but I'm going to say that it's a common thread. Timing. People feel it takes too much time. And the thing that's tricky is that upfront planning saves you time on the back end. And so I'm learning this with my own business and what I'm doing every day. So I started doing some better healthy eating type stuff. And I have a checklist because I'm like, if I check off that I did what I said I was going to do, then I have proof to reward myself and feel better about what I did to keep me on track. If I don't track it, then I'm just like the photography business and I'm like, whatever. And then I stop doing it. So I think it's a motivation. People think if they write it down, they have to do it. And they also say it takes too much time. That's too much for me to think about all up front. It's overwhelming to think about everything that you have to do. And then when you write it down, it's like, oh, now I kind of feel like I have to do it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it's that sense of overwhelm that I think leads to, I'm not good enough to do this. I don't know how to do this. I like all the things, and the barriers then come out, and then it's like, well, this is just too much. I can't do it. And so it starts to stack one on the other. It's funny also when Suzy was giving her sort of introduction and discussion, I was also thinking, wow, this applies so much to general life, because menu planning is a great example. I have done menu planning at different times, and I know some people thrive on it to the point of going into their pantry and going, this is what I've got left, this is what I need to buy, and this will feed my family for a week, say. I can get as far as choosing the dishes and making sure I've got, say, the key meat and basic things. And then we'll get to that day and go, no, I really don't feel like that, so I'm not going to cook it anyway. And that can then undo any forward planning. And then you go, well, I'm no good at this, so I won't forward plan. So I think then to the kids, or I was actually, personal example here, the other week I was thinking, we've never had a cleaning schedule. I know some families will be like, okay, sheets are done on this day, vacuuming's done on these days, or whatever. And the random things that float through my brain is quite scary, really. But on the weekend, I was thinking, my husband and I, from a very early stage, we didn't really get into an absolute routine or have anything written down or whatever for the maintenance things that might need doing around the house, or, you know, wiping on the fridge. Who does that? Oh, that's a scary contemplation. Some people have everything really organized and maybe a list or something in a reminder on a calendar or something to do the every so often tasks. Say cleaning a fan, a ceiling fan, that once a season, you know, they might have right on the first day of the new season, I'll clean the fans or something as a reminder. Yeah,
I have that. I have that in my Google Calendar, first of each season, to vacuum the return vent on the aircon.
Fans. Yeah. Whereas we've just always gone by the seat of our pants to a degree and just do it. But does that mean that we cover all the bases? No, it leads to more. I mean, it doesn't worry us. I know people where it really worries them if they don't keep things really clean. We tend to go on hey, we've got a gap here, we'll do some of this or that. And we bought a RoboVac. That was life-changing to maintain the baseline. Especially, we were talking before we began about pets. When we've got 2 dogs and 3 kids plus the 2 adults, the RoboVac is a sanity saver, provided someone empties it, which sadly is still me generally. But anyway, it really got me thinking that we haven't taught our kids, you know, other people may do this, and every Saturday they wash sheets on every single Saturday or whatever the routine might be. And I'm like, we fit it in where we can fit it in, but then we're pretty relaxed on a lot of other things. So the kids tend to be pretty chilled and not stressed. So anyway, I rambled a bit, but it just makes so much sense, right? That's an everyday application of the same thing. If we put a bit of structure into that, it wouldn't have to be a rigid checklist that must be done by a certain time. But if we had a checklist like what you mentioned, Suzy, it might be, hey, this hasn't been done, probably worth ticking that off so that we remember to do it.
I love
Takes that overwhelm out. Sorry.
And you're right. I wrote some notes while both of you were talking. So there's some quote, I can't remember who it's by, but it's like, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 5 hours sharpening my axe. And I think sometimes planning is like that, because how often is the rework or post work take longer? Like meal planning, for example, if you have no clue and it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, what are we going to have for dinner? I don't know. And you go to the shop and then you're just so tired after you've queued and got back in the car and got home and unpacked everything. Let's just order pizza. Like, you know, I know we've all been there. And when you were talking, Christine, like I have a looser plan like yours, because like at the day of recording this, I was like, I don't want that for lunch today. So I picked what I was going to have tomorrow. So just do a swap. So where is the plan supportive to your lifestyle? Because some people really like it being quite rigid. Like on Saturdays we do sheets and on Sundays we mop the floor. And other people like a looser schedule. The only reason I have the quarterly first of each quarter for the aircon is otherwise we don't remember to do it. And then we're like, it's not working that well. And then you have a look at it, you're like, aha. So with any sort of plan, is it fitting into your lifestyle? But back to Suzy's point as well, a lot of people's resistance is the time it takes. And for anyone listening, my question underneath that is time, money, energy are usually our 3 go-tos. Don't have time for that. Don't have money for that. Don't have energy. That can't be asked. What's underneath that? Is there a fear of it failing? Is there a fear of it succeeding? Which a lot of people laugh at, but people are often, we're used to failing. We're used to stuff not working, but if something takes off, and to your point, is the plan supportive of you going forward? as opposed to being restrictive. So I know you've created a workbook, Suzy, for business planning, which I'm sure you could also use for life planning. But bringing it back to that, can you talk us through how you've got that set out? Because I loved your first point of like, who's this actually for?
Yeah, I want to comment on what you just said too, is that it goes into what Christiane was saying as well. If we don't do the things we need to do, so for example, if I'm not taking care of the oil in my car regularly, my car's going to break down. So is it, more expensive to replace a problem with the car after it's broken down, or is it easier to put it on my calendar to say, hey, I got to take care of the oil? So it's the consequences of not planning in certain situations. And that's similar to how I think of when you're doing business planning. If you're thinking ahead, and again, to your point, Suzanne, it's not written in stone, but you got to have a start. It's like start somewhere, and it can always change. If you don't want to do something that you wrote down, that's okay. Just change it. Totally fine. But to get the thoughts going, so I'm thinking about who am I serving, and get those creative juices flowing. Maybe you have 3 or 4 different types of people you want to serve. You can pick and choose, and then start with one, see how that works. If you don't like it, that's okay. Pick somebody else, but at least it gives you a starting point. So back to your point about the workbook is set up in sections. And so it's set up to have you think about each section of your business. So your business concept. So what is it that you're doing? And then marketing is for who it is that you're doing it for. How are you pricing it? How are you going to sell it? And then operations is how does it flow? So when you do sell, what does that look like? What's your client experience? A lot of people don't think about that. So how are you taking care of the people that you're serving? And then your team. So team management is, hey, maybe you're starting solo right now, but in the future, as you grow, do you want to grow? How big do you want to grow? Who do you want to help you? Contractors versus salaried people. Thinking that out and kind of thinking it through and saying, okay, if I do grow to a certain size, how do I want that to look? And then financial planning, which is really what it is. It just talks about how much does it cost for you to start this business, and how much does it cost for you to maintain it, and how much do you want to earn? What is it that you want to get back from having the business? And I did it in a simplified form. So it's just fill in the blank. Really easy to, I'm not going to say it's really easy. The feedback that I've gotten is it's very thought-provoking. So it takes time. And I will say that I actually just had somebody asking me questions about it, and they're not even through the first section yet. And she's like, I got stuck on thinking about what I want my business to look like. And I'm like, you are not alone. It's huge. That's a big thing if you haven't thought about it.
You've raised so many great points there. And particularly the piece I want to pull out was a team. Like, are you looking to grow to a team? How are you wanting to, bring them on? Is it a salary position? Is it subcontracting? And I think a lot of people get so overwhelmed by the big picture planning that they just kind of put their head in the sand and, I'll worry about that when I get to it. But often it's when we worry about stuff when we get to it, it's too late. It's kind of like, if you trial proof the house once your kid's already crawling, there might be a few tumbles that could have been circumvented had you bought the gear earlier on. I'm sure Christiane's got some stuff to say. So,
oh, totally. And like the perfectionistic factor of, but I've got to know how it's going to end. Well, you don't, but you need to pick something in the meantime. So if you want to start working one-to-one in a service style thing, okay, well, how much time does it take? Because I've just literally been going through this with teaching in my course. How much time do you take for preparing for that consult, the gathering the information, factor in that? How much time do you spend in the one-to-one, and how much time afterwards? Okay, so how much do you plan to do per hour, or whatever it might be? And then if you've got products, obviously it's a bit of a different thing, or a combination of products and services, but it can be, I just don't have every single piece of information, so I'm not going to do anything. The number of times I've seen that, and these beautifully skilled people are sitting there desperate to begin, but they get so caught up in the details. So having something that steps it out, it's not necessarily going to be easy, but it's all laid out, because it's a process, right? Suze and I have been talking behind the scenes about some very exciting stuff coming for me to do with a membership. And that's been months worth of teasing out the details. Did I know exactly what I wanted at the end? No. But we started with something, and then we could start to go, well, do we want this? No, actually, we want it this way instead. And if you don't start with something like what it sounds your workbook is, that thought-provoking kind of get the juices flowing, because once you have that, where the attention flows, the energy goes. So all of a sudden you go, hang on a minute, I know how much I'm going to charge. I know the people who I mainly want to focus on. And that doesn't mean that you won't sell to other people outside of that, but you'll attract the people that you get clear are your audience. And then business can actually become a whole lot less scary, because how often, Suzy, actually both of you, have you seen it where people are like, oh, business is scary and hard, and there's a lot of conditioning that it has to be hard. And sometimes they're going, I don't want to do all this planning because it's so hard. And yet if you put the time into the planning, it becomes, you're in flow, you're enjoying it. It's a nice journey. And the same could be said for everyday planning too, of the menu planning. How amazing is it if you know I need these ingredients over a week, and you can apply this to both kind of perspectives, I think.
I'll be curious to see what Suzy has to add, but from my experience, people can tend to go in the extremes of either way, as in they will plan so much but never actually take any action. It's like, I have my business plan down to the wazoo. I know exactly how many posts I'm going to put on, exactly how many platforms, exactly how much I'm going to charge, how many people I can have in my program, my big picture vision, this and this and this and this. Like, do you have any clients yet? No. So, or people who have no plans and just kind of, hell for leather, go for it. And then it's kind of like behind the scenes, it's like my good friend Martin does tapestry, and he's like a really good person at tapestry. It's as neat at the back as it is at the front. So whenever he sees someone's, he'll turn it over. I'm like, if you ever turned over my cross stitch, you would not see anything pleasant. So it's kind of like finding that happy medium between, hey, I'm going to plan and try it out. Like as Christiane, you're seeding your membership, which I cannot wait to see. But there's only so much you can do, or we can do planning it, before you actually launch it. And then based on how it's taken up, how the experience of the customers, the experience of you from delivering it, evaluating. And I think this is where many people come unstuck. It's like, it didn't go exactly according to plan, so I'm going to throw the thing out entirely and start a brand new business. I'm not speaking from personal experience at all. Or it seems to be something odd about evaluating and or 100% we're not changing the plan. It's odd. So I'm curious what your experience has been, Suzy.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm with you about the whole throw it all out. Like I gave up on my business and went back to work. Like I was like, I didn't have a plan, wasn't sure what I was doing. And I was like, this is not fun. And it can be fun, and planning can be fun. I love what both of you have said about making choices. So it's really about making choices and then reevaluating, saying, hey, do I really like that? Is that working? And then if it isn't, you can switch it up. But having a starting point, just having a place to start. And I think by going into it that way and saying, okay, this is not ever going to be finished. My business plan is never done. It's a working document. I go back and I look at it all the time. And maybe the workbook that I do, yeah, that's a starter one because it's at the very beginning and so much is going to change, but it's a starting point. And then you can create something that is, okay, maybe I want to be more detailed with my operations section or my team planning or however you want to slice it up, and say, okay, we're going to revisit this every month until we get to where we know it's something solid. That's the beautiful thing of planning, is that you get to make it what you want it to be. If you don't want to eat what you made for lunch the next day, give yourself a choice. Say, okay, I have 2 things I could have. And then you get to have a choice, which is what we love. We don't like to be restricted. I think a lot of people, there are people out there that are happy to do exactly what they put on the piece of paper. Like, I'm going to eat this and that is it. And they don't veer from it. And they're okay with that. I'm not one of those people. I love choices. And so putting those, and Suzanne, you can attest to this with boundaries, because I look at my calendar and I'm like, I don't want it to be on my calendar every Tuesday at 5. I do something specific. I want to be able to do that at different parts when I'm in the mood or when something fits well. I'm just more fluid that way. And that's totally okay. I think just reassuring people that when you plan, it can be planned for you to succeed. So don't plan in a way that's going to make you just throw it out and be like, I did this big, huge plan and then I don't like any of it. I'm just going to throw it out. So think about how you, for the listeners, how you function, and work your plan, whatever it is that you're planning for, whether it's at home or it's at work or it's in a business, whatever plan that you're doing, align it with how you function as best you can.
I love that. And I love how you're talking about the flexibility to revisit it. Like, you're not Moses carving this into the stone and this is it forevermore. It's kind of like, here is a working document. And then, as you said, scheduling time to look at it and rework it, and then managing your mindset about what comes up when you do that. I literally just did this morning. I was like, I've been doing this thing for a few months. It's not netting the yield, like the result that I had anticipated. So it's like, when is it that we tweak? When is it that we keep going? And when is it that we just ditch this thing? And I remember I was chatting to my coach about it, and she's like, well, what are you celebrating from the fact that you've ditched this? And I was like, well, I gave it a good hot crack. So, and then I realized that this thing isn't for me, because how often do we have something in the back of our mind? Like, one day I'll write a book, or one day I'll do this thing, because it's so much nicer to tell ourselves we could have done one day than to do it and go, oh, wow, like writing the book is such a small part of the story. I know, Suzy knows, because then you actually have to market it, and like you have to sell the thing. Like, to me, it's like, once the book's written, the angels will come down and the unicorns will fart rainbows and whatever. It was like, oh, this is really disappointing. So I think a lot of our holding ourselves back from planning is we just don't want to sit with the disappointment. It's just nicer to dream big.
What if we dream big and then we're successful? You touched on this before, Suzanne, just to make the confusing thing between the names happen. Because if we, and you were just talking about this in another module that I listened to in Why Wait, actually, as far as, okay, so I'm going to plan this big thing. But if you've had a lifetime of being told that you can't be successful, or you won't do this program, or you won't be able to sell products or whatever, if you're doing planning steps that would actually make that happen, do you think that you're likely to sabotage yourself inadvertently from actually achieving that? Because you're going, if I do that, then that would be bad in some way, or I've been told that I can't do it, so I can't do it, and you become self-fulfilling. I think that's really that self-concept, we don't realize that things will come up when we're doing planning, when we're doing business, that are actually have been ingrained in us from other people. It's not ours to own, but we've owned it. And so when you're working through a workbook, when you're working with Suzy, Suzanne, or myself in coaching in something may come up which is completely unrelated, and you feel like you can't break through the ceiling on that topic, or you're having more trouble than you expect. It's like, why can I just not work out who I'm selling to? Or it could well be, take a step sideways and go, where have I seen this before in my life? Or what else needs addressing in my life? And I'm sure, Suzy, you've seen this as you're supporting your clients as well. The act of developing a business and planning for your business, it will bring up other things. And that's part of the beauty of it. It's the amazing journey that you suddenly realize whatever that person said to you when you were 6 that you're still holding on to actually doesn't apply to you when you're 40 something or wherever you're at. And be ready for that. It's really exciting to actually kick those to the curb and not be in that land anymore. But that's part of it. Can be scary especially when you're first starting to go, oh, I had people telling me, and this, I'm sure you've both seen this as well, when you first start out in business, oh, how's that little hobby business going? And it's other pressure. And so when you're doing the planning, you might be hearing someone else saying, oh, you could never charge that much per hour. Well, Why not? Like, look at what you're doing. There's realistic. If you're going out into a field and suddenly charging $1,000 an hour, and people that have been doing this for 10 years are still not charging $1,000 an hour, well, okay, that's probably a bit unrealistic. But if you've got experience and knowledge and a product to offer, you can start to price. And just because a family member, especially, they're the worst for it, I find, or someone that's sort of close to you says, really, can you really do that? If I was still listening to some of them, I would not be doing what I'm doing now, because I've had to. There are people that want my knowledge and are happy to pay me for it. And I'm okay to accept that exchange of value of my skills and experience for that. So, Suzy, have you seen that with your clients where they're sort of upper limiting as such, or they're stumbling along things where there's belief patterns that they didn't even realize that they had ingrained in them?
Yes, I do see that a lot. And that's where I myself have coaching certifications to be able to work with them to a point. And then I always network and have business professionals that I refer them to. So, for example, if somebody is really struggling around boundaries, Suzanne, then I'm like, okay, I can see that you're struggling in this area. This is very specific and it's something that's coming up and you're really getting stuck. And I help guide them to the place they need to be. But I do want to share my own personal experience with this because it happened recently and it's in my business and it's speaking to who it is that I talk to. And I didn't realize I was doing it until I started working through who is it that I serve? Who are the people that I want to work with? And when I started working through that more detailed, it started really big. Okay, women entrepreneurs. And I was like, okay, that's way too huge. Who am I talking to? So I shrunk it down and I went, okay, corporate women leaving a corporate job. And I was like, yeah, I've done that too. Yeah, it's it. But there was something missing and I had to dig deeper. The reason that I picked who I talked to is it's me. I had to reflect me. And what I was doing is I was doing what I had been doing. I was a medic in the Army, spent a year in Iraq, came back with PTSD and some physical injuries. And it took me over 10 years to work through it and like really deal with it and all the things that I went through. And I wouldn't tell people that when I left the Army, I wouldn't tell people that I'd been in the Army because I was like, if I talk about it, it's going to be ugly and I'm going to deal with it. And it was scary. And I was like, oh, and when the light bulb went on and I went, you're not telling people your story. You're not telling people that you worked in a medical industry. You worked in veterinary medicine and then you started a business and you struggled. Like that's what you're good at. Like you have all this knowledge and you have an experience and you have a personal experience. So not only business degree, medical experience, but I also did it. And I thought, hello, and I'm ready. So like sharing my story is helping other people. And I was blocking that. I was just like, who do I want to talk to? Just like, and I didn't realize it. My subconscious is just going, safety's on. Don't do that. And I realized how powerful it was to just say, you know what? I got to talk to my people because if I went through it, there's thousands of people out there probably going through it too. And they need to hear it.
And I think that's such a great point that we can often segment ourselves into roles. Like I'm doing this now and I'm doing that now. And we discount previous experience because it's not directly related. And even when it comes to things like pricing, both of you have mentioned pricing. It's like, I don't ever charge for 1 hour because like, a few times people have said you charge how much? Like, it's 1 hour. It's like, but are you really buying 1 hour? Because as Christine mentioned, the time you go in before to prep for the session, then there's the time after the session where, then there's all the hundreds and thousands of hours of coaching, training, coaching other people, clients, learnings and stuff that's gone in. It's like, it's funny in other industries, we don't blink an eye. Like if a plumber comes over, they often will say it's like $10 for the part and then $990 for knowing where to put it. And it's kind of like coaching. It's like however much for the question, but the rest of it's knowing which question to ask, knowing which piece when the person does their verbal to pick up on and ask. Like, it's curious that Christine, you mentioned the Why Wait module earlier. I always teach it live, and this is, my personal experience. I don't like the dead energy of pre-recorded programs. I find it, each to their own. If you love it, that's great. But for me, it's kind of like, here's something, the hair doesn't even look like this anymore. Their eyebrows are totally different, and they're not even speaking about this topic, and you want me to listen to it and then come to coaching. So I teach my program live. This current cohort, which Christine was referring to, I'm sensing a lot of either perfectionism or sabotage or some combination of both here. So I just polled them this morning, and I was like, I'm changing up the latter half of the program. Like, what do you want? And it's like self-sabotage, 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 both. But if I have to pick one, self-sabotage. I might see, you don't have that opportunity when it's like, here's something I recorded 10 years ago. Good luck. But it's kind of like the planning, in terms of how you run your business and how it works best for you, and the matter of both, like in terms of business model and stuff as well. Another one that I personally don't like is if I give you something to watch ahead of the thing, and then you come to the thing and I just teach the same thing again, that irritates the life out of me. I was having a chat to a friend who went to it recently. She's like, why did I spend 45 minutes watching this video to come to the call for her to say the same thing exactly over and over again? So, but you're not going to know any of these things if A, you don't first make a plan, and start something out, and secondly, have a go and then learn from the delivery, and then going over your plan and going, okay, this was wonderful, this was not, and this is what I'll do differently next time.
It's the continual improvement cycle. That's what, with everything we've been talking about, I don't know where in my different studying, learning, whatever, I've seen it, but it's something that's been a common thread through a lot of what I've done. And I even remember when I finally got a job in a university, I'd been trying for years to get something related to my degree. So I finished my degree in 2002 and was trying to find jobs and whatever. I worked as minimum wage. We've talked about this in other episodes, minimum wage, typing and all sorts of admin sort of things. Finally got to a uni job, and there were all these notes for this practical class that I was in charge of. They hadn't been updated in so long, and the innate knowledge that went with those went with the person who I was replacing. She'd been there a really long time, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, and so I updated them, and I brought in a whole new format, and everyone's like, you did what? But it meant that as they changed the labs in further years, they just updated that living document, and it revolutionized that thing, which funnily enough then built my skills. And I ended up, when I had my babies, I could have, it turns out, gone back to that job. Didn't apply for it because I was pregnant with my twins while doing this job, and didn't realize that I would be able to continue in it, because I thought, well, you're employing a pregnant lady, maybe you don't want me back. Oh, the things that we tell ourselves, right? Anyway, a couple of years after they were born, my husband was made redundant. I'm like, oh, who's going to get the job first? So I went into technical writing, and those couple of years worth of firstly doing the notes in the first job and then doing some part-time other work, it set me up beautifully, because the engineering firm went, you've got attention to detail, you've been doing continuous improvement, you've been working through old systems and updating them. We don't care that you don't know about this system or that system. You can learn that, but you've got the technical skills to apply it. That's no different from being in business, right? You get in and you do something, you put a basic plan together to put some sort of paperwork, some sort of systems in place to go, well, let's try with this audience. Okay, like you said, Suzy, may not be working. All right, so let's go through and do a clear view on this, because this isn't working, but this showed really good signs. And like Suzanne, you were just saying for the module, of what the audience needs over time will change. What you find interesting will change over time too. And the best businesses will be dynamic and listening to the cues. And funnily enough, in all this, to wrap it up nicely with a bow, if you've had some sort of a plan, even if it's been loose and you've been reviewing it gradually, it's a whole lot less scary to have to come back. And it's actually pretty exciting to go back to the old one and go, oh, look what I did. And then to look at it with fresh eyes and go, wow, I actually have moved along, and look how far I've come, and look how much I've learned. And then the next one becomes a bit more exciting. And then the next one, and it steps through. Like, I was reflecting, it's 6 years since I started business planning for my current business. I've come so far, like so far. But when my business coach was asking me the hard pressing questions in the middle of 2017, I don't know where I want to be. I hadn't really thought about that. And funnily enough, and I'm sure you've both seen this yourselves or with clients, if you make a goal, what you think you can get done in a year, you actually may be able to get different. You might try and jam lots into a year, but not enough over 5 years. Well, the longer goals, I think my 5-year goals I had reached within 2 years because we put some little baby steps in. Made such a big difference.
There's that saying too, we overestimate how much we can do in a week and underestimate a year or something like that. But that makes me think, and I'll pass back over to Suzy shortly, but business planning is kind of like going to the dentist, in that if you go and have your 6-monthly checkup or 6-monthly or quarterly review of your plan, it is a lot less work than if you ignore it, and then suddenly you need a root canal. So it's kind of like if you, and I imagine, and this is what I wanted to ask Suzy, and pass it back over to you, and then we'll probably wrap up shortly. But if people work through your workbook, as you're saying, it can be a bit daunting or a little bit overwhelming that first time. But when you come back to it, even if you've gone in a totally different direction, or even if there's large chunks of it, you're like, actually, no, this isn't aligned. I imagine on each revisit, it's not like root canal time. It's more like, let's just tidy up and, tweak time. And I think a lot of us have had an experience the first time that may have been, traumatic or something. And I think it's going to be like that forevermore. So never actually revisit anything.
Yeah, I love that analogy because it lines up perfectly with when you do planning in general. And one of the things that when I wrote the workbook is I wanted it to be simple. I wanted it not to be scary, as little overwhelm as possible, triggering. And what I found is that even simplifying it, it's still a lot, but that's okay. And I think just having that reassurance and reassuring people that it can change, that's the key. It's like, if you go into it and you're just like, any of this can change, then you're just like, okay, I can do this. I can just make a couple of decisions and move forward. And I love what Christiane was saying. We learn and we grow and we change with it. And by putting those little things in place, our brain is so incredible. I don't know how much you guys know about neuroscience, but our subconscious is always going to find a solution. It wants to find a solution. So if you're thinking consciously, hey, I want to do this business, and these are the little things I want to do along the way, then your brain, when you're sleeping, is actually figuring that out. So when you come back to go to work the next day, you're like, wow, I'm actually talking to people differently. Or, hey, I had this great idea when I woke up about my website. Or I just decided there's something I really want to invest in that's going to help boost my business. It's because your brain's amazing. But we need to give it that little boost of like, what direction do we want to go in? So I think it's really helpful. And that it's really simple is what made me want to write the workbook, was just, let's strip it down.
If you don't have a plan, then I remember when I did my life coaching training again about 6 years ago, one of the things they talked about was if you've got a target and you're practicing some archery and you're trying to shoot an arrow, if you've got a target, you know what to, okay, there's wind, there's, distance, all this sort of stuff. But if you just say, oh, just shoot it over into that bank of trees over there, well, what are you targeting? You don't know what you're aiming for. So if you put something together as a plan, it can make such a big difference to then, exactly like you were saying, Suzy, you will manifest things because your brain is working with you, not against you. Because if you're going, well, I don't know which way forward, you're not going to attract clients. You're not going to attract people that'll buy your product or whatever it is. And you'll find that you're flailing. Whereas it's amazing what we manifest in the right people once we get clarity.
100%. So looking at the time, it's been fabulous. I could keep talking to you both all day. But before we wrap up, Suzy, where's the best place for people to find you? And where is the best place for them in business? Like, I know you do speak to like ex-medical professionals, but I know you'd also speak to planning outside of that. But whereabouts are they in their business? Like, is it startup? Are they established? Are they changing? I'd just be curious.
Yeah. So if you are thinking about starting a business, so you have this great idea and you're like, I've always wanted to be my own boss, perfect place. If you have started a business in the last couple of years and you're feeling stuck, you're working and working and working. Maybe it's not going the way you want it to. Maybe you're spending more money than you're bringing in. That's another good place. If you have a new idea, so your business is going along great and you're like, you know what, I want to add something. Let's add a service over here. I don't particularly work with products. That's a whole nother thing. So mostly service and online businesses. But if you want to add something, it's a great time to write a little plan for that specific new service that you want to do, to just see if it's going to play out and how you want it to play out. So that would be my suggestion of where you are in business. How you can find me. The best place to find me is on my website. It's SuzyWraines.com, SuzyWraines.com. And all of everything that about me is there. If you want the workbook, it's under the menu that people can find it there. But that's the best place to find me. And I have a podcast as well.
What's the name of your podcast? Plug it away.
The name of my podcast is Starting a Business Simplified, Navigating the Shift.
I love it. Thank you so much. And just a couple of things before we wrap up. Suzy's podcast is fabulous, so be sure to check it out. And with her workbook, I would recommend grabbing it from her website, because then you have the digital copy, which you can, rework, re-download, print out, go through sections. Whereas if you buy the printed version, then, it just tends to gather dust on the wall like most other things. So like, a workbook is in something you're going to work through. I 100% recommend a digital copy all the way. So anything else you want to say, Christine, before we wrap up?
Or get the physical book and a digital copy, and then you can plug and play as much as you. I find it really hard to write in a book, so I'm smiling along when you said that, because I'm like, if I bought the physical one, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to write in it.
Whereas I thought I was the only one. I buy books, like I get the Audible and the actual physical and whatever. Like I'm in a full immersion experience here.
Totally, 100%. No, I really appreciate your time, Suzy. I think that so many people, certainly who I know, will benefit from listening to this podcast. And even if you're someone who hasn't started something, but you've got an idea burning at the back of your brain, think about what we've talked about. Start to get your ideas together, because maybe it's not the right time for you to do something now, but it doesn't mean that maybe Suzy's workbook or what we've talked about today isn't something that you could start now before you're ready to execute. Because you don't want to get to that time where you go, right, I'm ready to quit my job, and you've done nothing towards it. I would highly recommend doing it sooner. So
100%. There's nothing worse than doing it all behind the scenes, launching it to no one. It's oddly disappointing when you put it out there and you're like, oh, wow, my mum and 2 of my friends seen it. So, yes, I love it. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
Bye.